Hey everyone, Sean O'Connor here, and I've got Emily Hughes with me today. We are promoting the hell out of Horror for Weenies. This is for Macabre Daily, so for all of you who are watching on YouTube, Horror for Weenies. This is your one-stop shop to have a crash course in everything horror. So let's get to it, Emily. All right, ready? Macabre Daily, here we go. Readers and listeners, let's get to it. All right, Emily, first and foremost, you got to tell me, give me some background on how you even got involved in curating horror literature, because I think it's fascinating and I kind of want to be you. Have I already made it awkward?
Never, never. You can never make it awkward. Um, I had a very strange path to where I am now, um, which started with working in book publishing, which is inherently a strange path. It's just a weird industry. And
I have never done it, but I hear that a lot.
oh
A
yeah, oh
lot.
yeah. And so to be on the other side of it now is especially surreal. Um, but I started out working in book publishing, and then, a few years into that, I ended up in a job where I was working on a website for readers that focused on sci-fi and fantasy literature. And horror was kind of an extension of
Okay.
that, but, nobody was paying a ton of attention to horror in, 2013, 2014 just yet. Um, but as I started kind of developing my own reading taste, from my early 20s on, I realized how attracted I was to weird, freaky shit in books, which is a weird way to phrase that, I guess, but you know what I mean.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
So I ended up really kind of doubling down on that, and I ended up working at Tor, and then when they launched their horror imprint Tor Nightfire, I ended up running the website for Tor Nightfire for a couple of years, and got just like really, really into the world of horror. I was just sort of like, okay, these are my people. These are my, weird freaks.
Guilty. Guilty is charged.
And then
That's
oh,
fantastic.
go
So
ahead.
did that lead to re-jump scares?
Yeah, so at some point I decided, I really like writing about I really like telling people what to read, basically. And it's all well and good to do that for a website. It's all well and good to do that for, an editor. But I just wanted to be able to kind of dash off my own thoughts. And I started a newsletter. God, this was in like 2019. Um, and that sort of turned over time, gradually that evolved into my website, readjumpscares.com. Um, and where that kind of came from also is that for the Tor Nightfire website, I had been compiling these lists of new horror releases every year. Um, because it was something I was doing for my own reference, and I thought, well, if this is useful to me, it's going to be useful to other people. So when I left Tor, I ended up continuing that on my own website because people really it sounded like people really needed it and used it, and I mean, you've been so wonderfully vocal about how helpful it's been. I hear from readers, I hear from booksellers, I hear from librarians, I hear from reviewers and bookstagrammers. Um, because it's like, frankly, it's just not really a resource that exists anywhere else. And
$100%. I
I have
couldn't
this
agree
whole
more.
weird like system of, I have like a series of bookmarks when I'm, looking for new releases. I have a form people can fill out if I've missed something. And it's kind of taken on a life of its own at this point. But I figured, well, I've got this and I can still use it to, talk about other books and other, horror movies. And then Horror for Weenies happened, and we've kind of come full circle.
I love it. I love that for you. But I have to take a moment though, because I do want to thank you, because you're right. This really is one-stop shopping for everything that you need to know for horror literature. When you were doing it for Tor, I was just ravenous. I could not wait for the list to come out. And now that you do it for readjumpscares.com, same thing. But it's, on a monthly basis, we get, we can break it down to, okay, here's what's being released, this coming Tuesday, but then we get your recommendations as well, which I can't, again, I know that I've thanked you and thanked you and thanked you, but I'm going to thank you again because I'm serious about it. We're in a time right now where literature is under attack. And I cannot believe I'm saying that in 2024. When I was growing up, I'll be honest, and we've talked about it, it was a lot of great horror literature, but it was all
Oh yeah.
white guys. And it was from that perspective. And now we've got so many different voices and so many interesting voices, and they're so diverse, and I love that about where the community is going, particularly the horror literature community, which in my dime store opinion, I feel like that's bleeding out into the cinematic world, which is kind of like my area, but I can see it happening. There's so much great queer horror that's happening on screen and on the page, and diverse voices and indigenous voices, and it's just like it's just very
It's no,
exciting.
it's amazing. It's like it's blossoming right now, and it's so cool to see that. And discoverability, even before we get to things like book bans and like social media platforms messing with their algorithms so that it's just really hard to get your book in front of people. Um, from my background as a book marketer, I'm very well versed in exactly how difficult discoverability is. And so I thought, well, okay, if I'm like a person who is doing this professionally and I'm having trouble finding these books, then
Right?
I know other people are, especially if I know that they're out there and I'm just not finding them. For other people, they just don't know that they're out there, so they don't even know to look. So if there's like anything I can
Yeah.
do to get it in front, like to get any book in front of a few more eyes, then I count that as a success.
Well, you get one of these. You get a big horror heart because honestly, what you have done to put the word out there and to help people discover new and interesting voices. Oh boy, don't get me started. We could
Oh
go
yeah.
all day on this one, but we got to get to horror for weenies. All right. So, all right. How the heck? All right. So, horror for weenies, and let me do it full justice. Horror for weenies. Everything you need to know about the films you're too scared to watch. Just my favorite. So, how the heck did this come about?
So the wonderful, wonderful team at Quirk Books and I had been talking about this idea, and my wonderful editor Jess Zimmerman, who is herself a self-professed weenie. I'm not, insulting her here. She's very, very open about being a weenie. And she's very much the type to read the Wikipedia plot summary instead of watching the movie because she just doesn't like to be scared. And but she's she wants to know what's going on, and we would kind of laugh about this, and she was like, well, that should what if that were a book? And it just kind of grew from there. And one thing I love to do is to introduce people to horror who don't think that they like it or don't think that it's
Right?
for them. And if there's one thing that I believe wholeheartedly, it is that there is something in this genre for absolutely everyone. Absolutely, the most nervous
Couldn't
person,
agree more.
the person with the most sensitivities and topics they need to avoid, the person with like the lowest threshold for like absolutely freaking out. There is something here for you too. Like horror does not have to be scary, it often is, but like horror is about fear. It's not inherently frightening, although it's often that too.
And it's cathartic. It's absolutely a cathartic experience, but it's been, agree or disagree, it's been my experience that when I encounter a person that is like, I cannot stand horror, I am a weenie extraordinaire and I avoid it at all costs, and then I ask them, hey, would you mind telling me your top five, top 10 films? Two of them are invariably horror films. And they're just not. They're just not aware of it. They're like, "Oh, I really love Jaws," and I'm like,
I have some
"Okay."
news
You
for
know?
you.
So yeah. Oh, did you see this? Oh, The Sixth Sense is one of my favorites, and I'm like, oh, interesting. So, people they actually love it. They're not really aware of it, but this book, oh my gosh. So, Horror for Weenies. Who do you think is the perfect candidate to pick up this
I mean,
book?
I think it's literally my editor, right?
It is Jess. Oh, by the way, the introduction from Jess is Chef's Kiss. Jess, 10 for 10, no notes. I love the intro.
She will be thrilled. No, I mean, I think that it's great for anybody who's, curious about horror and too scared to really like jump in with both feet. Like, obviously, that's the kind of the target audience, but honestly, I think it's also going to be great for horror fans who just want to like get a little bit more depth into their genre of choice. Get some fun facts, get some perspectives they might not have considered. And it's also a great gift. I have to, if I, am I allowed to say that? I guess I am.
Yes, please do.
um, it's
Please
a great
do.
gift, especially if you're someone who loves horror and you love someone who is a weenie, or vice versa. It is a let's call it a relationship building tool. How about that?
I love it. I want to go back to what you said though, because I've seen, you know me, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of horror movies. It's what I do. But I picked up this book, and by the time I was, 4 or 5 pages in, I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Just to give you an example off the top of my head. So, Scream, you've got Scream in here. And the relationship between Billy and Stu is really reflective of Leopold
Hmm.
and Loeb. And it hadn't even dawned on me. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do a double feature with Rope right into Scream, and building a rainy day a double feature for myself. But it's things like that. So I want to shout this from the rooftops. Horror lovers, this book isn't just for the scare curious, although it absolutely is. This book is for horror lovers as well because I got so much out of it. It's so thorough. Okay, before I really get into the nuts and bolts, I have to ask you, how did you even decide on what movies go in
Oh
this
my God,
book?
it was so hard. It
Right?
was so hard. You know, I had a moment where I was like, I just have to do like a brain dump of every conceivable movie I could put in this book and then pare it back from there. And the brain dump list was close to 50 movies. And I was like,
I cannot believe that. That seems like a short
I
list
was
to
I
me.
was like, I thought I was being very selective even with that. And I was like, there's no way I can do this and keep it to like a reasonable page count. So then I started kind of just like shaving away like the entries that I was like, well, it doesn't really, I can't really justify keeping that. I can't really justify keeping, personal favorites that. So the criteria I was using was influence and lasting cultural influence. Um, so a lot of the movies in there are going to seem fairly obvious, but like they're the heavy hitters for a reason, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Psycho is foundational to the American horror tradition for a reason. Um, and then there were movies where I was kind of like, I can't really justify keeping this in. Personal favorites like Event Horizon, a movie I love, but I just couldn't. I was like, this is not going to be, the influence has not been widespread enough, and like, this is not going to be super meaningful to people who are not already hardcore horror fans. And
Gotcha.
then there were
Okay.
movies where I was like, I desperately want to include this, but it's sort of, I don't know, that weird genre crossover space that especially that happened a lot in the 90s where it was, oh, this is a thriller, it's not a horror movie, right? Like Silence of the Lambs is kind of a
Lot of
classic
that.
example. And it was like, okay, if this could plausibly be, another genre, then maybe. And that was one that I was sort of like, I can't think too much about it or I'm going to break my own heart. Um,
I
and then
get
there
it.
were movies like, okay, I've got The Exorcist in there, obviously one of the like titans of horror cinema, I can't really justify also having The Omen as much as I love it, because they're kind of doing the same thing. They're kind of doing that, like, oh God, the millennium approaches, religious horror. Um, and that, that was a really tough process. And I'm sure that if I sat down to write a list of, 25 movies for this book again today, I would pick a different set of movies. It's just one of those.
I'm just putting it out there. This book begs for a sequel, and then the sequel begs for a sequel. I feel like it's going to be a trilogy, or maybe just an ongoing series. I don't know, Quirk. I'm just putting it out there. There's so many. The films that you choose are spot on. Because I think for someone who, like I said, is scare curious, these are the classics. These are the ones that they need to. They probably, to put it the way you describe it, and Jess describes it in an introduction, these are the films that come up at parties that people talk about, horror lovers talk about, and they get in depth. And for someone on the outside of that who is too scared to watch it, now they've got the Cliff's Notes, and they have the tropes and the themes and the interesting points to bring up, so they can jump into that conversation now and be part of it, even though they haven't watched the movie, which I kind of love about this. I love any hack code. So here you go. This is the ultimate hack code for people that are too scared to watch the films. But I think all the movies that you chose are just, that's what I was so impressed with, and I was so curious. How did you choose these films? Because they all make sense, and they all, you have it blocked into sections, and they all make so much sense together. You've got the summary there. You've got the tropes and the themes. You've got the points that you can bring up in that cocktail party conversation, but it's so easily digestible. So how the hell did you figure out the format for this? I'm so
That,
impressed.
honestly, the brilliant Jess Zimmerman, my wonderful editor, was instrumental in that. She had this vision of sort of what the book would look like, and it got tweaked and adjusted over time, of course. But the idea that, I mean, as a weenie herself, she had a lot of visibility into what she would want out of this book, right? And so that was
Ooh,
that was super
okay.
helpful, because I found myself in this position of being like, I don't know if this is interesting to me. Is this interesting to someone who's never seen this movie, right? But I had that immediate person to like bounce those questions off with her. There's a great example,
Yeah.
actually, is in the section about Halloween. I had thought, oh, I'm not going to include that fun fact about how the Michael Myers mask was a William Shatner mask that they had kind of adapted, because everybody knows that. And in edits, she was like, "Hey, I just found out this interesting fact from my husband about the Michael Myers mask," and I was like, "Okay, fine, okay. Not everybody knows that. I got to put it in there."
Gotta go in.
um,
Thank thank goodness for Jess, because it's true. People that are kind of like on the inside track, we could omit things because, oh yeah, sure, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. But for the weenies, they've got to know, and it's here. It's all right here.
well, hopefully, I was able to balance the, like, oh, everybody knows that, but everybody doesn't, with the, like, everybody knows that and everybody kind of does. So we'll see.
Well, look, even for the people that do know it, it's great. It's great because we're all, I mean, privately, we all are know-it-alls in our horror, knowledge. So when we see it on the page, we're like, yeah, I knew that. We feel good about ourselves. So I'm glad it's there. At least I do.
Oh, no question.
Two questions. Okay, so first being, besides the Omen, because I completely understand how you had to omit that because of The Exorcist, but was there any other heartbreaking omission that you
Oh
couldn't
my God,
include?
yeah. I mean, Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. I had talked myself out of including it at some point, and I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? That was insane. Like, it's something I've been a little anxious about, is that other people are gonna pick up this book and go like, this is garbage. This table of contents. How could she not include this, this, and this? And then I was like, well, I'm doing that to myself already, and I've been doing that to myself since I started writing. So like, pot, hello, this is kettle, you're black, but the I think the those cuts are just starting points for conversation, right? Like, well, why didn't you include Alien? Well, page count also for these reasons, right? It's a starting point for conversation, not a, you didn't include this and therefore the whole book is null and void, right?
You are going to get a barrage of first. There's always going to be those, horror fanboys that are going to say that. When I say
Oh,
boys
I
very
know.
specifically, it's always you men. It's always do better. You know, so it's always going to be them. But they're going to, it'll come fast and furious. What about this, and all I'll say to that is pick up the book and read it first. If you get to the last page and you still feel that way, then post it. But buy the book first and read it. You know, and also I'll be your cyber bodyguard. So if I see that online, I'll just be like, buy the fucking book, dude, and read it.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
So Shannon and I have your
Excellent.
back. All right, my favorite section of the book, and I'm being very, very vague about what's inside because I don't want to give away the treasures. So you have to buy the book. Notice I haven't mentioned, besides Scream, what movies are in there. I've mentioned the format, and you're going to get the tropes and the themes and so much good stuff. But one thing, and this isn't a spoil, this is a treat. My favorite part of the book is your suggested read-alongs because we are targeting this book to the scare curious, but we're also really hitting the readers out there, the people who just love to read. So the read along is my favorite section. How did that come about?
That one was all me. I will absolutely take the credit for that one.
I had a sneaky suspicion. Yeah,
If there's one thing I love to do, it's give people book recommendations, and there was no way I was going to write this whole book and not do that. Obviously, for so many of these movies in the book were based themselves on books. Um, so I made it a point to point it out, when there's source material, but I also wanted to give, a few reading recommendations for each movie that were. So for me, horror fiction was a way into horror film, right? I was a scaredy cat kid. I was convinced that I couldn't watch horror movies. And the way I came back around to them is, as I was saying earlier, I got really into reading weird, dark, messed up books. And I figured if it could serve, if horror fiction could serve as that kind of gateway drug for me, it could for other people as well. Um, and I think it's easier to read disturbing things than it is to watch them sometimes because you're able to kind of mitigate how you're visualizing them in your own mind. Or it's
I
easier to
agree.
put down a book and go like walk away and clear your head than it is, if you're sitting in a movie theater, God knows. Um, so I wanted to give some reading suggestions that would capture the vibe or the tone or the same themes as the movies so that readers could hopefully kind of replicate those experiences or that feeling without having to sit through, let's say, Get Out or Hereditary.
Love it. I love it. One thing that you've done as well, and I don't think that this is spoilery, so I am going to mention it. You go out of your way to emphasize who should watch this movie. Hey, if you're interested in this, check this out because of these reasons. But you also go out of your way to say, hey, look, if these things are not your cup of tea, maybe this movie isn't for you. Look, it still means that you can buy the book and you can read the summary because this is safe and it's warm and it's delightful and there are no scares. But I love that you go out of your way to say this could not, maybe this isn't for you if you're upset by these specific things. So I don't think, to my knowledge, I've never seen that before in a horror movie reference book. So whoo, I hope that kind of becomes the norm going
Thank
forward.
you.
Well
Thank
done.
you. I mean, I take giving recommendations very seriously. like probably too seriously. Like I'm taking it more seriously than the people I'm giving the recommendations to. Um, but I have friends who, especially like as I've had friends who've had kids, it's been a like, oh, I really want to read this, but can you tell me if there's anything that bad that happens to a kid? Because I just can't deal with that right now.
Yeah.
Or, like me, I have friends who are very, very sensitive to harm to animals in fiction or in movies. Um, so or of course there are like
Completely.
your kind of like more standard, content warnings, assault, things like that. And I just want, I
Yeah.
want people to be informed. I do think there's also this, like, I think as horror fans, we've probably all encountered this, somebody showing us something that was way more disturbing than we were expecting, because they kind of thought it was funny. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to turn people off the genre. And so I want people to, I like informed consent is the kind of watchword there.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, it gives the reader, it gives them the ability to decide on their own if they want to proceed with that movie or not, instead of going in blindly. And to your point, getting grossed out and then horror's not for me and turning their back on the genre completely, which we don't want. We want people to fully embrace it. But we want them to be able to fully embrace it on their
Yes,
terms, I suppose is what I'm blathering on
you're
about.
absolutely right.
All right. I I have to ask you. Okay. Um I'm going to get personal now. I need to know what your favorite horror subgenre is.
Oh, it's folk horror. It's always going to be folk horror. There's just something about it that is absolute catnip to me. I feel like it's also kind of it's an easier subgenre to sort of adapt for like stories for kids and younger readers. So I feel like I kind of grew up on some of that stuff. Um, even if you think about like Sleepy Hollow, like Ichabod Crane, that's folk horror, right? I mean, folk
Right?
stories are folk horror a lot of the time. And I love the subgenre both in that kind of like broader application and also in the very specific application. The way we talk about it in this sort of formal way is like, okay, it started with, these three, the unholy trinity of folk horror movies from the 60s and 70s from the UK. We've got The Wicker Man, Blood on Satan's Claw, and The Witchfinder General. And even in both of those contexts, I'm just like, yeah, yeah, give me the small towns, give me the thing in the woods no one's talking about, give me the like the townsfolk secrets, give me the harvest rituals. I'm so down for all of that always.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that has been bubbling up to the surface in damn near every single guest that we have had on Sinful Cuts. And it's funny. It's almost like an East Coast, West Coast. But I was talking to Todd Kiesling recently, so Pennsylvania, and he's like, yeah, we've got some great folklore. And then he's from Kentucky originally, and he's like, oh boy, don't even get me started there. But then I've got John Langan, and he's like, hey, man, Hudson Valley's where it's at. And then I got Robert Atone, who's literally moving to Sleepy Hollow and has written about it in his works. And he's like, hold my beer. I mean, it's like this, it's like this folklore extravaganza that I just can't get enough of. So I'm with you there. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a creature feature man myself, but I have enough in my black decrepit heart. I've got enough room for all the
Don't we all?
subgenres. But folk horror is having, boy, it's having a moment in
Yeah.
literature, and it's having a moment on screen too. So very exciting things on the horizon. Don't even get me started on
Oh
the
my God.
Unmothers. This is not what this interview's about, but don't even get me started there.
Phenomenal book. It's so, so good.
Oh my gosh, I might have to have you back weekly so we can just start talking about
Sounds
books.
perfect.
Oh, one last question, then I promise I'm going to let you go. Okay, so give me, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but it's my favorite thing. So give me one movie recommendation. Doesn't have to be new, can be whatever you want. One movie and one
One
book.
movie and one book. Okay. I'm going to start with book. I'm going to say, what's a book? Well, I've never read a book in my life. Yes, I have actually. Sacrificial Animals by Kaylee Peterson is the last thing I finished, and I really
Okay.
thought it was exceptional. Um, it is, it's a debut novel, and it's one of those debut novels that makes me angry at how good it is. Um, it's the
Oh
story
boy.
of a father and two sons. The father owns 1,000-acre farm in Nebraska, and the sons are both raised there. And the father is cruel and tyrannical, and the sons both, hightail it out of there as soon as they can. But years later, when the father is dying, they come back, and the younger son has kind of made his own way in life, never gotten married, and the older son comes back with his wife, who is not quite what she seems. And it plays with Chinese folklore, it plays with this sort of like American frontier, self myth making. The writing is astonishingly good. It's like,
And a
yeah,
debut novel?
yep. And it's got some elements of
Come
like The
on.
Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones in there. It's got some this is not a horror novel, but it's the book that this reminded me of the most. It's called The Story of Edgar Sawtelle, from about 15 years ago. Have you read it? Yes. Oh my
I
God, that
have.
book is fantastic. And like, this is very reminiscent of that. It's got that like sort of
Oh,
beautiful,
this book is bought.
perfect,
This book is bought.
phenomenal.
All right, you got a movie for
Always,
me?
always, always. Oddity came out this year.
No, no. I I was going to give you two. I was going to give you a book and a movie, even though you didn't ask me for one. I was going to give you a book and a movie, and Oddity was
Oddity's
mine.
so good though. It's so good.
Emily, we're on Sinful Cuts. I know we're doing Hereditary. You're coming back. We're going to do Caveat, and we're going
Oh
to do
yes.
Oddity because it's the same director, and those films are
Hell yes, I'm
interlinked.
in. I'm so in.
I can't believe though that movie came out of your mouth. I cannot. That's my favorite horror movie of 2024 right now. I mean, I know we've still got time on the clock, but that is my favorite movie. And I saw it on the big screen, and the credits were rolling, and I'm just looking around like, can we all hug? We experienced something incredible, people, and then they called
Yep, yep,
security.
yep, yep.
That, that when I have those moments where I go in
Mhm.
blind and I discover a pristine gem like that, it's just what it's all about.
Yes.
It's what it's all
Well, I'm
about.
working on a weenie report about it
Okay.
right now.
Oh my. Okay. No, you know what? Yes, you could do the Weenie Report, of course, but I forbid people to read the Weenie Report. You have to also
Yes.
go
Oh,
see
you
this
must
movie
go see it
because it's
first.
so
It
good.
scared me. That jump
Oh
scare
yeah.
in that with the tent. It was just, oh my God, that was rough.
Yes, please, and thank you. And then the whole scene, it's about 4 minutes long, the scene at the door where you do not know who to believe is some of the best filmmaking I have seen in
Fantastic.
years. So Damien McCarthy has become, and it's weird. Demian Rugna, who did Terrified and Aterrados and When Evil Lurks, and now Damien McCarthy. Maybe it's his filmmakers with the first initial D. I don't know. I'm starting a weird theory, but that movie is absolutely insanely good. Can I give you, even though you didn't ask
Always
me, but can I give you a
bring it
book?
on.
Okay, ready for this? For our readers and listeners, The Blackwater Saga by Michael McDowell.
Yep, yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
I mean, yeah, yeah. So I won't say another word, which is very strange for me, but this take a look at it, listeners and readers. Take a look at that. Michael McDowell, who we lost too soon, and I'm kind of so excited that Beetlejuice is coming out, and his name is hopefully going to pop back into the ether again, so people can
Yep,
discover
yep.
him.
No, I think that's a great point. I hope someone does some like coverage around that with the new movie coming out, because I rewatched the first movie recently, because how could you not? Still one of the greatest comedies of all time. And it's just,
Right?
it deserves more attention. I have to be like totally frank with you and tell you I have not read the Blackwater Saga, and I know I have to. I know I
Gotta
have
check it out.
to.
It is just, it's, yeah, it's just, it's Michael at his best, and that's, I mean, that's a bold statement because we have what the Eternals and the Amulet. Do I have it right? The
I
Eternals?
think so. I'm
I
yeah,
think so.
I'm drawing a blank because my bookshelves are on the other
But
side of the house.
Cold Moon over Babylon. But anyway, his canon of work is out there for the listeners to discover if you haven't already. But I'm so good. Oh my gosh, I gave Emily Hughes a book recommendation that she hasn't read. Oh my God, you know what? I'm ending everything. I'm quitting Macabre Daily and I'm ending the podcast. I can't. I'm going out on a high note.
No, you can't do that. You got to give me more stuff I haven't read.
Oh my goodness, great. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be back like forever because when you said oddity, oh my goodness, I got
Yep,
dizzy.
yep, yep. Oh, it's the best.
All right, let's not forget what we're here for, though. Listeners, readers, horror for weenies. It drops on
Yes.
September 3rd. This isn't a question, but this is going to be the last thing we talk about. So, Emily, just give our listeners just a few of the events that you have coming up to promote the book, because I myself am going to see you on September 5th in
Hmm.
Brooklyn. And oh my gosh, I'm so bad at my job. That is at
Green light.
uh, Green,
Yes.
Green Light. So green light 7:30. People in the tri-state area, if you are even remotely close to green light in Brooklyn, please 7:30 p.m. Come see Emily. Come see Erin E. Andrews. Come see Clay McLeod Chapman, who is
Yes.
moderating. And there's I may be creating this rumor in my head, but I think there's a nasty little rumor going around that Nat Cassidy
We
might be in
shall
the audience.
see.
So
Who's to say?
we're
He
gonna
does pop up in
see.
the strangest places, doesn't he?
That Nat Cassidy, he's everywhere. So is
Yeah.
Clay, and so
I'm
are
trying.
you. So okay. Besides that, I know you're in Framingham with Nat Cassidy and a bunch of other incredible authors, and that is for
The Spooktastic Book
uh
Fair, and that's on September 7th.
Spooktastic. Oh boy, you are busy. And then we have something in October, right? What do we have
Well, we
coming
have
up in
another
October?
event in September. I'll be in conversation with Rachel Harrison about her wonderful new novel, So Thirsty, at an Unlikely Story in Plainville,
Right?
Mass. And then let's see, in October, I'm hosting a trivia night, a horror movie trivia night up in Greenfield, Massachusetts with the Imaginary Bookshop. And
I'm getting in the
yes, oh,
car.
absolutely. Come see it. It's going to be a blast. And then I think there's also
Come
going to be a
on.
pre-Halloween reading with the Golden Notebook out in Woodstock.
Oh my goodness. Fantastic. Okay, do me a favor. Just you and I will communicate. I'm going to post those on our socials and make sure that
You got it.
we just scream it
I
from the
do have an events
rooftops.
page on my website now too.
Emily, fantastic, and that's going to be in the show notes. So this is going to be on YouTube, and then I'm going to put it also on Instagram. And do me a favor though, when you're with Rachel Harrison, tell her I'm so excited for her, but I'm so mad at her because I follow her on Instagram, and she's had more fun than any 1,000 people I know this
Oh my God,
summer.
right?
She's at Asbury Park, and she's having ice cream, and she's having cocktails, and what is going on? And she's living a life. I'm like, Rachel Harrison, what is going on here? Go home and write.
She is living the dream. She is crushing it.
Well, so are you. So are you. And boy, oh boy, when this book drops on the 3rd, you better buckle in. I have a
I'll
feeling.
do my
Yep,
best.
yep. There's there's going to be more of these. I'm just putting it out there now. There's going to be more of
Hey,
these.
any good
I know it.
horror, it's always a trilogy, right? There's always three.
That's right. That's right. Oh, and and unlike most of the franchises, these are going to get better and better and better.
God willing.
Emily, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to be seeing you soon because I feel like I'm going to have you back every 48 hours. But this was an absolute treat. I thank you for your time. I'll see you on the 5th, and I'm so excited for the 3rd. Here
Absolutely.
we
Thank
go.
you so much, Sean. This was a blast.
You got it. From Macabre Daily, this is Sean O'Connor and Emily Hughes. Bye, everybody.